It would be almost impossible to overestimate the influence of Charles Baudelaire on French poetry, French literature, and probably on poetry in general. His life, his loves, and his struggles are all really well documented, as are most of his core themes like ennui, sensuality, and the exquisiteness of decay. So today on Out of the Page, I want to specifically talk about the one core theme of his that he returns to again and again in his writing, and it's the one that I connect with the most, and that is the beauty and horror of the modern city. So a quick background for anyone who is unfamiliar. Charles Baudelaire was a French poet and critic born in Paris almost 200 years ago in 1821. Although he was well educated and the recipient of a large inheritance from his father, he led somewhat of a bohemian lifestyle, refusing to settle on a vocation and regularly accumulating large debts. He spent big portions of his life in the slums of the city. This was punctuated by lengthy, volatile relationships, as well as extended periods of drug and alcohol abuse. Much of his writing was in the forms of essays and translations of writers he admired, such as Edgar Allan Poe, and he also had close acquaintances with the literary elite of his day. His reputation, both then and now, rests almost completely on the publication in 1857, but then in more of a complete form after his death, of a single volume of poetry called Les Fleurs du Mal, which in English is translated as The Flowers of Evil. It's a collection of poetry that he added to and refined for the last 10 years of his life, until he finally died of complications from a stroke at the age of 46. Le Fleur de Mal, when it was first published, was incredibly controversial because it included graphic descriptions of stuff like sex and drug use, as well as a single brilliant poem about the magnificence of a rotting corpse. It also includes a section, and that's the one I want to talk about mainly today, called Tableaux Parisiens, which translates in English to Parisian scenes. These scenes were intended to depict the harsh reality of life in the slums of 19th century Paris. Now, I know that might not sound too unique or revolutionary in its own right, but the thing that makes Baudelaire special and stand out among other poets, especially of his day, is that rather than writing about those things with pity and sympathy, he actually revels in the horror of that life. For example, my two favorite poems from those sections are usually translated into English as Evening Twilight and Morning Twilight, and they describe the city that he saw at those particular hours. So in the evening, he talks about things like gambling houses and brothels opening up for business, while broken and exhausted labourers are crawling home to bed, and thieves are preparing to pry open safes and doors to get the money that they need for their next meals, that sort of stuff. In Morning Twilight, on the other end, he describes the cold loneliness of the city. Paupers blowing on their fingers to stay warm, chimneys smoking over hospitals. Even when the sun at the end of the poem finally rises over the Seine, he actually describes it, instead of this beautiful, triumphant morning scene, he describes the sun as an old beaten worker rising up once again and preparing to get to its business. These sort of things are becoming, at least, more common nowadays. We literally keep rebooting shows and old films and just making them raw and gritty, showing the dark reality of a hero's life instead of the fanciful and bulletproof versions that we're used to. But even now, Baudelaire would stand out, and that is for one main reason. He wasn't just trying to show the true nature of urban decay, he was celebrating it, because to him, it was beautiful. It's also important to place him in historical context. In the mid-19th century, Paris underwent a period of rapid and wide-scale industrialization and development. The city was heavily redesigned from its medieval structure to be the example of a modern metropolis with wide boulevards, public parks and theatres, and with a thriving public transport system. In the space of just a few short decades, the city became almost unrecognizable from its former self, and to a lot of people, this new world, filled with new technology, represented a sense of alienation and disconnection. It also represented a shift in values, which inspired writers and artists like Baudelaire to move away from previous romantic schools of art. In 1865, Manet painted his famous painting Olympia, which actually depicts a naked high-class prostitute in the style of a Renaissance goddess. Needless to say, of course, Olympia was highly controversial at the time, but it was precisely because it was celebrating the beauty of someone in a profession that the society of the day really looked down upon. It was this exact same attitude that Baudelaire took to his writing about the city. To him, the cold contrast between the bourgeois neighborhoods and the hidden slums of the capital were a thing that shouldn't be shied away from or sugarcoated. He didn't want to lie and write about the heroic struggles of the city's down-and-out residents, because not only did he see himself as one of those people, he also didn't see their lives of something that deserves pity. In the grim settings of the reality of their lives, he saw the same thing that Manet saw in Olympia, which is something worthy of love and celebration. Nowhere is that more apparent than in one of my favourite Baudelaire poems, which is called Paris Dream. In it, he describes a dream he has of the city, in which it's this big sparkling crystal metropolis with giant gold pillars and goddesses wandering by pools of pure, perfect blue light. And right at the end of the poem, he awakes from the dream, and he writes, "As I opened my eyes full of flame, I saw the horror of the slum where I live, and felt, entering my soul once more, the iron of my cursed cares. The clock with its deathly voice was brutally striking midday, and the sky was pouring down darkness on the sad, sluggish world." As I said at the start, it is impossible to overestimate Baudelaire's influence on French literature. His themes, his vocabulary, his form, and his style of writing have all been studied to excess, and there's really good reason for that. He is a spectacular poet in so many ways. But if you ask me, his greatest achievement is the poems in which he celebrates the beauty and the horror of modern life and the modern city. If you are interested in checking out Baudelaire's writing, which of course I would recommend, there's plenty of places that you can do it. There are websites, because he's 200 years old, there's websites with free translations. There's all different translations you're going to find. The hard part, of course, is finding a solid translation. A lot of them, I think, make the mistake of trying to make him rhyme. Of course, he rhymes in French, but when you translate that into English to make it rhyme, because of the differences in sentence structure, it gets kind of weird and it's not exactly palatable. I've got this translation, highly recommend it. It's Penguin and Black Classics, translated by Carol Clark. She hasn't bothered to try and make him rhyme, so they kind of come across like prose poems, and there's also the French above it in case you're bilingual or have an interest in seeing what it at least looks like and it's presented like in its original form. So that's it for me today, and thank you for watching this video, and thank you for everyone who is subscribed to the channel. I know it's been a minute between drinks. We've been working on some other projects of my own, so I haven't had as much time to work on videos, but those projects have started to conclude, and hopefully I'll be back with a lot more videos soon. I've got a lot of scripts written and a lot of stuff to say. So thank you very much, and I will see you later.